Welcome back, listeners. Ready for another deep dive. It's funny how history class sometimes feels like we only got the Spark Notes version, right? Like they skipped all the really interesting stuff.
Definitely. It's always those little details that make history come alive.
Well, today we're diving into a world that thrived on those skipped parts. Secret societies.
Ooh, secret societies, always a good topic.
Now, you sent us a fantastic article from Smithsonian Magazine all about these groups.
Yeah, it had some good stuff in there. A lot of groups I'd never even heard of.
Exactly. And that's what we're focusing on today. Not your usual Freemasons or Illuminati. We're talking about the underdogs of secrecy.
The ones with stories so wild, you'll be wondering how they stayed hidden at all.
Seriously, it's
Yeah.
like were people just less nosy back then?
Right. No social media to spill the beans.
Okay, so before we get into the specifics, let's set the scene. Picture this. It's the 18th and 19th centuries. No internet, no cell phones.
Just candlelight and whispered secrets.
Exactly. Imagine the power of a whispered secret back then.
The allure of hidden knowledge.
People gathering in dimly lit rooms, exchanging ideas, forming bonds.
It's kind of romantic in a way.
It is. But here's the thing. These societies were born in a time when secrecy could breed distrust. Yet they often championed really progressive ideas.
Some even contributed to democracy as we know it.
It's a total paradox, isn't it?
Absolutely. Even the New York Times back then was questioning their motives, publishing articles that were like, are these groups forces for good or something more sinister?
And there was even a whole anti-secret society movement. But that's what makes it so fascinating, right? That tension between secrecy and influence.
Oh, for sure. It's like, what were they really up to?
All right, enough scene setting. Let's meet some of these shadowy figures. First up is a group with a name that kind of tells you everything you need to know about its origins. The Improved Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks of the World.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Right, but the story behind it is incredibly powerful.
The article talked about how it all started because two black men in Cincinnati were denied entry to the regular Elks organization just because of their race.
Totally unfair.
So instead of accepting that, they founded their own order. They created a space for black communities to thrive and support each other.
And get this, it still exists today.
Really? That's amazing. They turned exclusion into empowerment.
It's such a testament to their resilience. They saw a need and they filled it.
And they created a legacy that's lasted for generations.
Now, for a group with a name that just screams intrigue, the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland.
Ah, the Orange Lodge.
Yeah.
This one's all about history and, well, a little bit of controversy.
To say the least, it takes us right into the heart of religious and political tensions in Ireland. Protestants versus Catholics, the legacy of William of Orange.
And they held secret gatherings, even when they were banned. Talk about sticking to your principles.
Their marches are still a huge deal, even today. They commemorate King William of Orange's victory over the Catholic King James. But are they a celebration of history or something?
A bit more provocative.
Exactly. It's a reminder that those historical tensions, they don't just disappear.
It's a really complex situation. The lodge says they're not anti-Catholic, they just want to celebrate their Protestant heritage.
That distinction can get lost,
For sure. Especially when you've got those historical tensions simmering in the background.
All right, now for a group with a name that, I gotta admit, made me chuckle a little. The Odd Fellows.
The Odd Fellows. Odd name, odd group.
Seriously, why odd? Like, what's so odd about them?
Well, nobody really knows for sure. Their origins are a bit of a mystery.
Lost to history.
Yeah, but what we do know is that they had some pretty noble goals.
They focused on helping the working class.
Yeah, exactly. They helped people find jobs, provided financial aid, basically acted as a safety net.
Like a combination of a charity and a labor union.
And they did this way before social welfare systems even existed.
Plus, some pretty famous people were members. Winston Churchill, P.T. Barnum, even FDR.
Oh, and we can't forget about the skeletons.
The skeletons. Wait, really?
Yeah, they used actual skeletons in their lodges.
Oh.
Like a reminder of mortality,
Mm.
to live a virtuous life and all that.
Okay, that's both fascinating and kind of creepy.
Right. Memento mori in action.
All right, moving on to a group that emerged during a super intense period in American history, the Knights of Pythias.
Ah, yes. The Civil War was raging. The country was completely divided.
And their founder, Justice H. Rathbone, just really felt this need for unity, for brotherly love.
That's actually where the name Pythias comes from, right? It's a Greek story about loyalty and friendship.
Exactly. They were all about bringing people together, even in the middle of a war. They were even the first fraternal order to get an official charter from Congress.
That's a pretty big deal.
And their colors, blue, yellow, and red, they each represent something important to the order, too.
Symbolism, right. It's not just about pretty colors.
Blue for friendship, yellow for charity, and red for
Benevolence. It's like their core values all wrapped up in a visual package.
Speaking of visuals, let's talk about a group with a name that makes me think of, well, forests. The Ancient Order of Foresters.
Okay, this one sounds interesting. Were they like actual forest dwellers?
Not quite, but their name reflects their mission, which was to help people navigate the forest of life, which is just a poetic way of saying they provided support to those facing tough times.
Like a social safety net, kind of.
Exactly. They were like a proto-insurance program. Members would contribute a small amount regularly, and that money would then go to help those in need.
It's amazing how these groups were basically filling gaps that the government wasn't addressing at the time.
They were pioneers of social welfare in a way.
They were also ahead of their time in recognizing the importance of community support.
Speaking of pioneers, up next is a group founded by a mechanic who was really concerned about the plight of urban workers. The Ancient Order of United Workmen.
Ah, so this one was about more than just like helping people out when they got sick or something.
Well, they did that too. But their founder saw how industrialization was changing America, how workers were struggling.
And he wanted to do something about it.
Exactly. They focused on self-improvement, they had lectures, they encouraged their members to stay informed about current events.
Like a workers' education program almost?
Kind of. But the really interesting thing about them is their insurance model.
Oh, tell me more about that.
So every member would contribute $1 when another member died, and that money went directly to the deceased's family.
$1 doesn't sound like much.
It wasn't, but it was a revolutionary idea at the time, and tons of other fraternal organizations ended up adopting similar models.
So they were like accidental innovators.
Totally. It's a great example of how sometimes the biggest impacts come from the most unexpected places.
And it shows how these groups, despite their secrecy, they really were trying to address real issues.
Yeah.
They weren't just about rituals and handshakes.
Right. Okay, let's talk about a group with a name that pretty much embodies American ideals. The Patriotic Order Sons of America.
This one sounds interesting. What's their story?
So they were all about promoting American ideals and fostering unity.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
Well, not so fast. They actually have a pretty complex history, reflecting how ideas about what it means to be American have changed over time.
So they haven't always been so inclusive?
Exactly. For a long time, they restricted membership, even excluding black men in the late 19th century.
Wow.
It's very patriotic.
Yeah.
But according to their website today, they're now open to any male citizen, whether they were born here or naturalized.
So they've evolved.
They have. But it makes you think about those historical legacies, right? And how they continue to shape the way people view these organizations.
Definitely. It's not always easy to shake off the past.
Okay, ready for the grand finale. We're about to dive into the most thrilling tale of all. The Molly Maguires.
The Molly Maguires. I've heard of this one. They were like Irish freedom fighters, right?
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, but picture this. Irish miners in Pennsylvania facing brutal conditions, fighting for their rights, and shrouded in secrecy.
And they were accused of some pretty serious crimes, right?
They were, and this is where things get really interesting.
I'm all ears.
They were named after an Irish widow who famously stood up to English landlords, so the name itself represents this fight for justice.
So they saw themselves as carrying on her legacy.
It seems like it. These miners, they were working in incredibly harsh conditions in the Pennsylvania coal mines.
And they felt like they had no other option.
Exactly. They felt like they had to fight back, and sometimes that meant resorting to violence. And then,
don't leave me hanging.
mining bosses started turning up dead, and suspicion immediately fell on the Molly Maguires.
So things escalated quickly.
They did. And then a Pinkerton detective went undercover.
Undercover. To infiltrate the Molly Maguires.
Yep. He basically became one of them, gathered evidence, and eventually
Busted him.
arrests were made, and some of the Molly Maguires were even hanged.
Wow, so it's a tragic story, too.
It is. But here's another twist. Years later, their leader, John Kehoe, was pardoned.
Pardoned. So was he innocent all along?
That's what some people believe. They say the Molly Maguires were victims of anti-Irish prejudice and that the whole thing was just...
A way to silence dissent.
Exactly. But others still believe they were guilty.
I was like, who do you believe?
It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white.
And that sometimes the truth is really hard to uncover, especially when you're dealing with secrets and conspiracies.
It definitely makes you think about the ethics of undercover operations, too, and how easy it is to manipulate information.
And about how we judge historical events through a modern lens.
It's a case that still resonates today as we grapple with questions of worker exploitation and the fight for fair treatment.
Right. How much has really changed?
It's a sobering thought. And it brings us back to something we talked about earlier, the distrust surrounding these secret societies.
Right. Was it warranted? Or was it fueled by paranoia and prejudice?
That New York Times article we mentioned, it really highlights how those anxieties could spiral, especially during times of social and political change.
It's like fear can be a powerful weapon.
Especially when you consider the role of the media, newspapers could sensationalize stories, playing up the mystery and intrigue, and sometimes that meant
Bending the truth a little.
or a lot. Which is why it's always important to be critical of the information we consume, especially when it comes to groups that operate in secrecy.
Definitely. There's often more to the story than meets the eye.
Okay, I have a confession. Before we started this deep dive, I kind of pictured secret societies as like a bunch of guys in robes chanting in dimly lit rooms.
I think we've all seen that image in movies or something.
But now I'm seeing them in a whole new light.
I'm glad. They were much more than just that. They were about tradition, yes, but also about progress.
They were trying to reconcile the past with the present, right?
Exactly. Adapting their traditions to meet the needs of a changing world.
And that's what makes them so fascinating, that push and pull between the old and the new.
And sometimes those efforts led to some pretty amazing things.
Like the Ancient Order of United Workmen and their accidental invention of a whole new insurance model.
It's a great example of how innovation can come from anywhere.
But what really stands out to me, even more than the rituals or the secrecy, is the human element. Behind it all, you have these groups of people coming together to support each other, to find belonging.
Absolutely. That need for connection is something we can all relate to.
It's like that saying, we're all in this together.
Except in this case, this is a secret society with a really long name.
And maybe a fondness for skeletons.
Right. But jokes aside, I think what we've really seen here is the power of community.
And how these groups, even though they operated in the shadows, they actually had a huge impact on the world around them.
It's about recognizing their influence and understanding the complexities of history.
It's definitely changed the way I think about the past. It's not just about famous people and big events. It's about these everyday communities and how they navigated the challenges of their time.
And those stories are just as important, just as fascinating.
So as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, what would you say is the key takeaway here? What do you hope our listeners are thinking about?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Don't underestimate those hidden currents of history. Secret societies, even though they seem mysterious, they played a huge role in shaping the world we live in today. And their stories give us insights into human motivation, the desire for belonging, and how social change actually happens.
It makes you wonder what other stories are out there just waiting to be uncovered.
Right. What other groups have operated in the shadows, influencing events in ways we might never fully understand?
That's a really thought-provoking question. It makes you want to dig deeper, look beyond the surface, and challenge those assumptions about the past.
Who knows? Maybe there are secret societies operating right under our noses.
Now, wouldn't that be a twist? But in all seriousness, I hope this deep dive has encouraged our listeners to approach history with curiosity and a willingness to explore those less trodden paths.
Absolutely. You never know what you might find.
And sometimes those hidden stories are the most revealing. So to our listeners, keep exploring, keep questioning, and see where your curiosity leads you.
And we'll be back soon to continue our deep dives into these fascinating secret societies.
Can't wait. Thanks for listening.
See you next time. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like about how these stories connect to bigger issues.
It does. I mean, we're still dealing with worker exploitation today.
Exactly. The fight for fair treatment, safe working conditions. It's an ongoing struggle.
And it makes you wonder, like, how much has really changed?
Right. Some things never seem to go away.
And it also brings us back to that whole issue of distrust around secret societies. Was it justified or was it blown out of proportion?
Yeah, that New York Times article we mentioned really highlighted those anxieties.
People were afraid of the unknown, of what was happening behind closed doors.
Especially during times of social and political upheaval.
It's easy to see how those fears could be manipulated.
Oh, absolutely. And you can't underestimate the role of the media in all
Yeah.
of this. Newspapers could really sensationalize things.
Playing up the mystery and intrigue to sell more papers.
Exactly. And sometimes the truth got lost in the process. It's why it's so important to be critical of what we read and hear, especially when it comes to groups that operate in secrecy.
There's always more to the story, right? More layers to peel back.
Definitely. You can't just take things at face value.
Okay, I have a confession to make. Before we started this deep dive, I had this very specific image of secret societies in my head.
Oh, what kind of image?
Like a bunch of guys in robes, chanting in a dimly lit room.
Yeah, the classic secret society stereotype.
But I'm realizing now that it's so much more nuanced than that.
Right. They were more than just shadowy figures lurking in the dark.
It's like they were trying to bridge the gap between tradition and progress.
They held on to ancient rituals and symbols, but they were also dealing with very real contemporary issues.
It's fascinating how they adapted those traditions to meet the needs of a changing world.
And that tension, that push and pull between the old and the new, is what makes them so intriguing to study.
And sometimes those efforts led to some pretty incredible innovations.
Like the Ancient Order of United Workmen and their accidental invention of a whole new insurance model.
It's a great example of how sometimes the most impactful changes come from unexpected places.
Totally. It's a reminder that innovation can come from anywhere.
But honestly, what really stands out to me, even more than the rituals or the secrecy, is the human element. These were people coming together to support each other, to find a sense of community.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental human need, that desire for connection and belonging.
It's like that saying, we're all in this together.
Except in this case, this just happens to be a secret society with a really long name.
And maybe a fondness for skeletons.
Right. But all jokes aside, this deep dive has really highlighted the power of community, even when it takes place outside of mainstream society.
These groups, they challenged norms, they provided support, they even sparked innovation.
And their stories offer a unique window into the past, into the forces that shape the world we live in today.
It's definitely changed the way I think about history. It's not just about dates and battles anymore. It's about these everyday communities and the ways they navigated the challenges of their time.
And those stories are just as important, just as fascinating. They offer insights into human nature, into social dynamics, into the enduring quest for meaning and connection.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what would you say is the key takeaway for our listeners? What do you hope they walk away with?
I think the most important thing is to never underestimate the power of those hidden currents of history. Secret societies, despite their air of mystery, they played a significant role in shaping our world. Their stories offer a glimpse into human motivation, the appeal of ritual and belonging, and the ways social change actually unfolds.
It's a reminder that the most fascinating stories aren't always the ones that get told in the history books. There's always more to uncover, more layers to peel back.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, what other stories are out there waiting to be discovered? What other groups have operated in the shadows, shaping events in ways we might never fully understand?
It's a thought-provoking question. It makes you want to dig deeper, to challenge those assumptions about the past.
Who knows what we might find lurking in the shadows of history? Maybe even a secret society or two operating right under our noses.
Now, wouldn't that be something? But in all seriousness, I hope this deep dive has encouraged our listeners to approach history with a sense of curiosity and a willingness to explore those less traveled paths. There's always more to discover.
Absolutely. And sometimes those hidden stories are the most revealing. They offer unique insights into the forces that have shaped our world.
So to our listeners, keep exploring, keep questioning, and see where your curiosity takes you. You never know what you might find.
And a huge thanks to our listeners for providing us with such intriguing source material. It's been a pleasure diving into these fascinating secret societies with you.
It has. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep exploring.
It really is amazing when you think about it, how these groups, operating in secrecy, had such a profound impact.
It's like they were working behind the scenes, shaping the world in ways we never realized.
And it makes you wonder, what other secrets are still out there? What other groups have left their mark on history, but we just haven't uncovered their stories yet?
Right. It's like history is this giant puzzle, and we only have a few of the pieces.
And maybe we'll never have all the pieces, you know? But that's what makes it so fascinating. There's always more to discover, more layers to peel back. Always another mystery to solve.
Well, I don't know about solving mysteries, but I definitely feel like this deep dive has given me a whole new perspective on history. It's not just about memorizing dates and names anymore.
It's about the stories, right? The human stories behind those dates and names, the motivations, the struggles, the triumphs.
And it's about understanding that history isn't just something that happened in the past, it's still shaping the world we live in today.
Absolutely. Those hidden currents, they're still flowing, influencing events in ways we might never fully grasp.
So to our listeners, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep digging deeper.
You never know what you might find.
And who knows, maybe you'll even uncover a secret society or two along the way.
No, that would be a story worth telling.
It would. But for now, we'll have to leave it there. It's been a fascinating journey. And a huge thanks to our listeners for providing us with such incredible source material.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure exploring these secret societies with you.
Likewise. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.